My question again, is why it's it's not a why. This is not an issue of why. Here's what I'm going to say. It is and should not be hard to call out CoreCivic, and that should not require legal action. All that should require is people speaking out. It isn't hard looking at the history, looking at the fact that Mr. Beasley graduated from Vanderbilt Law School and that Cornelius Vanderbilt and Vanderbilt University, who's that named after, that he promoted slavery. I think a person could say he was involved in slavery. He gave people resources at the very least to evade the end of slavery in this country. And I'm sure there's more than that, but I do know that. So Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee, in the South, where we have this history of slavery. That is so much of what is going on. I think there might be at least one, you know, legal case having to do with it being human trafficking. It is. There's all kinds of human trafficking that's gone on. All right. So what do we really need to look at? All right. Some people don't want to think about history. Oh, history doesn't matter. All right. Well, what does matter to you then? So history, yeah, matters. All right. So if I'm thinking about that though, and how do you get someone's attention that doesn't want to think about history? All right, so have been rounded up. People are being harmed. People are dying. If a person asks for health care, has pain or something happens in a facility, if they aren't ignored, there's a real good chance they're going to be harmed. That what is going to be done to them is going to do physical harm to their body. So, what needs to happen? We could look at the whole prison system. And yeah, isn't it part of that, even with private contractors? The prison, all that stuff is an outgrowth of history. All right, so, and there even are facilities in the areas where plantations were. All right, so when people don't care, I mean, I don't know how to make people care. I clearly am not real good at that. You know, uh, when people don't care, people die. That is what that when people don't care, people die. Sometimes people die in places people aren't aware of. And why is that? Well, the news is pretty biased, all right? So, we have this fragmentation of media and also media companies owned by, I think about Sinclair and how many, it's a lot. And there was a real rude woman on LinkedIn that works for Sinclair. All right, so nasty to me about, you know, being a clairvoyant. Yeah, well. Again, it shouldn't require legal action. All that it really should require is calling it out. Calling it out. I think about the New York Times and I think about discontinuing my subscription in the past 2 years, 2 or 3 years. I think the price of it went up, but also, after something happened and the news coverage, it's like that is so biased. And it is. We have to think about that. And a person might say, well, anything is biased. Well, when people are being killed, I mean, you know. so, so, there's so much that I could say, and I have said so much about it already. And I'm going to say it again. CoreCivic has to be called out. People need to keep calling it out. And sometimes maybe it takes. I think of people who might be very, very confrontational and how. I mean, I don't know what to say. I think of things that have gone on in the past several years where I'm like, well, I wouldn't quite have done that. I think what I would have done is, so this has to be called out. that is a company contracting with the federal government. People have been rounded up. People, I guess, are continuing to be rounded up. It has to be put to an end. So, what is it going to take? I mean, I am calling it out, and this is not the first time I've called it out. I am calling out CoreCivic, started by a graduate of Vanderbilt Law School. And Vanderbilt, Cornelius Vanderbilt, having been, I think a person can say, involved in slavery. At the very least, subsidizing. I mean, yeah. I mean, what do we know about industrialists? I mean, child labor comes to mind. So yeah, I have thought, well, does Mr. Peasley need to be approached in a way that is, not upsetting to his, moral interior? Well, I'm sure that you didn't intend for this to happen. All right. Is it possible that it spun out of control and he doesn't have control? I mean, I don't know. Who has the answers? I don't know much about business. I am not a business person. All right. So I'm a science person, perhaps a spiritual person. I'm a humanities person, if you want to think about it that way. But I don't know much about business. All right. So, but I do know that is a company traded on the stock market, contracting with federal government. And these facilities have to be closed. What is it going to take? What kind of international effort and work with governments where people aren't wanting to kill everybody? Because I really have to believe that not everybody wants that. And somebody might say, that's an enemy and that oppression. All right, well, yeah, oppression abounds. There is so much of it. What is it going to take to shine the brightest possible light on CoreCivic? And that is not a bad place to start. Shining a light on CoreCivic and getting people out of the concentration camps into safety. And I do need to say, people who have been working in slave labor jobs, not everyone has. And it's pretty broad range at this point, including someone, at least one person, who had some arrest decades ago, who was born in a refugee camp in post-World War II Europe. I mean, there's that. There are people with names that look Muslim. There are people who are indigenous to these continents, and that slavery just keeps on and on. So people who have been working in jobs and being, we could talk about traffic. Well, that trafficking thing, again, slavery. All right, so CoreCivic is trafficking. What is going on is trafficking. Money is being made on human bodies in facilities, and that makes no sense at all. Where is it going? I mean, is there anyone out there that can sort of, I mean, I'm calling it out again. And I really hope that people will join me in calling it out. And how do you do it? I mean, I'm doing it, and I'm here in the South. And yeah, would I be afraid to talk to Mr. Beasley in person? Not at all. In a courtroom? I mean, I would prefer not to. Could he sue me for doing this? Well, some people like to sue people for anything and everything. I don't know if he's like that or not, but he's an attorney. I mean, what needs to happen? What needs to happen, because people are suffering extremely. People are being harmed and people are dying. We could say people are being killed. And yeah, how do we get people to start caring? How do we get people to start caring? And yeah, I am calling it out once again.